I lost custody of my daughter. I got divorced, which ended up being a good thing. I was in a marriage that was not healthy for me, and ended up getting divorced and decide at that point in time, my goodness, I don't have custody of my daughter. My daughter was my world. She's my only child. We had a close bond from day one, and my world was devastated. I went to rehab, started becoming sober, and found it to be such a struggle trying to accept that I was actually an alcoholic. I just couldn't picture myself as that.
From Second Opportunity and U-Turn Health, this is the Path Forward Podcast, episode 23. I'm your host, Augie Ghilarducci, and my guest today is Trina Waslenko, who I met at a conference in Austin, Texas, maybe a year and a half ago, a little more than a year ago. And I followed up with her because in speaking with her, her story is great. The things that she's doing right now with her life are great. And I thought she'd be an excellent guest on the podcast. So I'm back in the studio. The last couple of episodes, I had been at some conferences on the road, and it feels good to be back here and in a comfortable place to have this instead of the last one. We were in a room of a hotel, like a meeting room, and we had the staff keep coming in, bringing in coffee and those things, setting up for the next meeting. So this is comfortable. We're going to have a nice conversation. So Trina, thank you for being with us and welcome.
Thank you, Avi. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm just actually honored to be here as well. Thank you so much.
Well, I'd like to get us started by just getting to know you a little bit. So you shared with me that you were born in a different country. So would you share a little bit about where you grew up and what your life as a young person looked like?
Absolutely. So yes, I was born in Canada. I grew up in a very small Canadian town. I had what you would call really a picture perfect childhood. My father worked and my mother stayed home. I was an avid into figure skating. I was a competitive figure skater across Southern Ontario and skated really up until mid high school competitively. My brother played hockey, as all good Canadians do, and really just grew up in a small, close-knit town. I skated before school. I skated after school. I boarded away in the summer times for my family and skated and just had a very regular childhood. We got transferred to the United States when I was going into the 10th grade of high school, and then got transferred again to where I lived most of my life, which was Buffalo, New York. I'm currently not in Buffalo. I'm currently in the state of Florida. But like I said, just a normal childhood, just a regular kid, good family. And I guess what we're going to get into and talk about is where my life changed and when my life changed, and then what's happened since then. And
why don't we move to telling us where your life first started to change and what that change was?
So the defining moment that when I look back at my life was really in junior high. First time I ever tried alcohol. First time I drank alcohol, I handled the alcohol different than everybody else. And when I look back on my life, I look at that first sip of that substance, I biologically and genetically just handled it different than anyone else. So I was a regular kid in high school, transferred around to a different country and going to different events and experimenting with alcohol. At the time of my senior year in high school, moving to a new place and trying to fit in and going to parties, drinking alcohol, I would found myself getting drunker than most people, blacking out and having a different experience than other people who perhaps drank alcohol. At that point in time, I got my first DUI, which led to years of other arrests and different things happening in my life. So I got a DUI goodness, I was about 18 years old where I actually drove a car off a bridge and landed on a landing underneath. And by the grace of whomever above, was very minimally hurt and did not hurt anyone else. Got slapped on the wrist for that. Went to college and started going to college and joined a sorority and started drinking alcohol there and got another DUI. That time, I had to do a little bit of things to be on probation and community service and things such as that. But I could not accept that I had a problem drinking. I couldn't accept it at that point in time. I could not look at myself. I felt shamed. I really couldn't accept that I had this problem with alcohol. My history as it continues, I get married. I married a boy that was older than me from high school. I had a child. I get another DUI. And this time it's really bad. This time my child's in the car. It was absolutely horrific. My child is my world. I can tell you today that I am walking my daughter down the aisle, soon to be. So that's something that I'd like to get to. But at that point in time, I had actually, the marriage for the boy in high school turned bad. This was one of the worst things that could ever happen in my life. Did not cause me to stop drinking. However, I lost custody of my daughter. I got divorced, which ended up being a good thing. I was in a marriage that was not healthy for me and ended up getting divorced and decide at that point in time, my goodness, I don't have custody of my daughter. My daughter was my world. She's my only child. We had a close bond from day one, and my world was devastated. I went to rehab. I started becoming sober and found it to be such a struggle trying to accept that I was actually an alcoholic. Me, I just couldn't picture myself as that. Finally got sober. After a while, maintained my sobriety for a couple of years. Don't you know, as where life would have it, that my ex-husband developed a drug addiction while he had custody of my daughter. I got sober and regained custody of my daughter, which was phenomenal. Couldn't be happier. Bought a second house. Decided, okay, at this point in time, I'm gonna, I had actually gone to school to become a hairdresser. Ended up having a successful career as a hairdresser. Had custody of my daughter. Started as a hairdresser, having some problems with my neck and different things, and go to a doctor and got prescribed pain pills. I've since had a neck surgery and promptly got addicted to opioids. This was before the opioid epidemic. At that point in time, driving, I got another DUI. This is now my third DUI. Within 2 months later, I got another DUI. I now am charged with a felony. And this is a period of more than 10 years that this has all occurred. I have a house that now I've lost my job. My daughter hates me. I have a felony. And I am now addicted again. I went on medication assisted treatment. I went on Suboxone. I was put on probation and got sober. And it took 2 years for me to go to court. And within those 2 years, I was on medication assisted treatment. I decided, okay, well, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to do something different. I lost my job at hairdressing. I had built a clientele for all these years. I was very successful. I need to do something. So I went to school to be a chemical dependency counselor. So I graduated with honors while on medicated assisted treatment. While on Suboxone, I graduated with almost a 4.0. I did very well. I ended up weaning off Suboxone, and I'm on probation. And my probation officer says, Trina, I want you're sober now, to go for an addiction assessment. I want you in counseling. And I look at this exact moment in the judicial system in my life as another defining moment. I looked at what had happened in my life. I looked at how much I love my daughter and how could I do that with the addiction that I had suffered. I looked at how hard it was for me to accept my addiction. I looked at my life being destroyed not once but twice in the situation that I was at, and I looked at my probation officer. I'm going to air caution on this that I didn't do this as an excuse. I did this as a fight for my life. I looked at my probation officer and I said, "No, I need I need mental health treatment. I need mental health treatment." And he said, "No, you don't. You need to go for chemical dependency counseling." And I said, "No, I don't." So I went for the assessment, spoke with a chemical dependency counselor, and she said, "I will agree with you. You go to mental health counseling." Um, so I think in the judicial field and being someone who may be, in a situation who is incarcerated or is in the same situation that I was in, to definitely advocate for treatment that makes the best sense for you, but never to use it as an excuse to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. But I went to mental health counseling, and still to this day, almost 20 years later, this is now, I am still in counseling and I am working on becoming the best version of myself. I have, because of the life experience that I gained and the situations that I've gone through and how I was able to heal. And I'd like to talk about, if it's okay with you, how I got to where I am now from all that, everything I told you of where I was. That I was hoping, Augie, that when I came on this podcast, that speaking with you, I could talk about the healing that can occur, that you can reach, and the peace and inner joy that anyone can get just from different practices, and using my own experience and talking about some things that have worked for me.
Well, I think that's terrific. I will share that while I was away, I spent the last 5 years. I was in the RDAP dorm, the Federal Prison Drug Program dorm. I served as clerk there, and I saw a lot of men whose lives had been seemingly ruined by their substance misuse and those issues, and still looking to find a way to heal and to get on with their lives. Some of these were very young men. I mean, some guys were 23, 24 years old. They've got their whole life in front of them, and I think struggled with figuring what is this going to look like for me. So anytime we can have somebody on the podcast that's open enough as you are to share what worked for you, that maybe there's that one or two or 10 people out there that are watching this, that a light bulb goes on and they say, that's something that I might like to try. So please, if you would, just share with us what that, I think you called it your healing journey. And would share with us what that looked like?
Absolutely. And I'd like to also say that, if I can say to people, that I had this internal feeling in myself that I am not my addiction, that I am a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a woman, I'm someone who loves health and wellness. I'm someone who loves nature, who loves the outdoors. I'm someone who's had some health conditions. That addiction is only part of you. And I would like to add that please never ever, and the young man, the men who are there, never let anything define you. Incarcerated people, that is not who you are. You're a person who happens to be incarcerated, and but you're also a father, a brother, a mom, a dad, someone who's good at art, someone who likes sports. That's just such a little piece of me, and I just refuse to let the addiction be just who I am. So, as I said, I sought mental health treatment, and I said, here's what's happened. Something my behaviors, my choices, something is not working. Addiction is a disease, it is hereditary, it is a biological thing. But what has happened since then in my life is I did go to school for chemical dependency counseling. I ended up getting a job in the mental health field, and I ended up running a peer support and medical based team. And I ended up advocating against stigma against opioid addiction. I ended up being in a media campaign and putting my face on a billboard to help fight the stigma against opioid addiction, because anyone can be addicted. I don't care who people are. And then at this point in my life, I said, okay, I've gone through all this. What do I want? What's important to me? What's important to my heart? What's going to bring me joy? What's going to bring me happiness? And I talked to my daughter and I said, honey, I have never liked the cold weather. I want to move somewhere warm. I've always wanted to live in warm weather. I have moved myself to a warm climate and got a job advocating for a program that helps people who have been convicted of DUIs, and now traveling the country and going to conferences such as yourself, but continuing learning and growing, and finding my peace. And what I want to talk about is that anyone, incarcerated or not, can find their peace, can find their joy. And that's not always a lot of money. That's not always a great job. It can be living a life of that's quiet with the people that you invite into your life, protecting your boundaries, doing things that protect your inner heart and soul. So when you go to sleep and when you wake up, you actually feel happy. And for the first time in my life, I have found that. And now I'm working on protecting that. And that can be hard, making decisions of not inviting situations in my life that not are necessarily bad, but don't move me forward. And being able to recognize that, I truly owe that all to counseling and therapy, and learning about myself. And I'm a huge advocate for mental health counseling. I want to challenge the medical industry to make mental health a mental health wellness visit, an annual visit, just like when you have to go for your physical every year. Mental health, if you do not make healthy decisions in your life, you can't have a healthy life. So now what I'm doing is learning to protect boundaries and keeping situations away from me ever going backwards. And I keep moving forwards. And sometimes I have to make decisions that maybe people don't understand and maybe they don't like. But I'd like to encourage anyone, suffering from addiction or not, that when you protect your boundaries and you're making decisions to protect your peace, your heart, and your soul, that anyone who doesn't like the decisions you make benefit from you not having boundaries. So really, I'm just growing and evolving and learning, and have found such an inner light and joy that I want everyone to know that they can have. And once you find it and once you have it, I'm going to encourage that you do everything in your power to protect it. And life's challenging. I've suffered along the way from morbid obesity. I've suffered from diabetes. I've had a stroke, and I've overcome all those. And life happens, and I just like, I think my message and my purpose for being here was trying to encourage people that you can be in the worst situation, in the darkest place that you've ever been in, and you can come out of that and not only heal, but get to a place where you can wake up and feel happy, at peace, and calm, and good internally. And I just don't think there's anything that can replicate that feeling.
Are there some specific things that you do to find that peace when life happens around us and it starts to feel, I think for all of us, on some days things feel overwhelming? Are there some things that you point to that you're able to do to allow you to navigate those types of days?
So for me, I, besides talking about it with someone, practices that work for me, and I think what works for me work for me, and I think what works for the person, for yourself, Augie, may work for you. But I'm going to encourage that you do what makes yourself feel good. So for me, what the practices that I do is I make sure every week that I get outside when I can. And I know that's hard for people incarcerated, but if I can get outside any way that I can. I've been told, Trina, you should do mindfulness. You should do that. That doesn't work for me. I'm hyper. That doesn't work well for me. And so I would suggest to anyone that you tell your therapist, you tell your caseworker, you tell whoever, this is what I would like to try. What are your thoughts? And like I said, never use this as an excuse not to do the work, but doing what works for you and making suggestions and feeling that you are valid enough to have a voice in your own healing. My practices today is I work out on a daily basis. I've lost more than 130 pounds in my life. And now
Wow.
yeah. So yes, I more than that. So and have maintained it. And actually, Augie, since I've met you, I've lost a lot of weight, but been able to maintain that by exercising on a daily basis. And I'm really working on growing as an entire person. And I think of women who are incarcerated, and if I could just speak to the women only just because I can tell these that I can relate to these women who are moms, who may be struggling with diabetes, who may be struggling with weight. That they're coming out of being incarcerated, and not only do you have to get your basic needs met, which is challenging in itself, but then you have to deal with not feeling well, depression, anything such as those things. All those things are okay. I have recovered from chronic depression. I've been on mental health medications. I now take no mental health medications. It's all from learning to value yourself, mental health counseling, and just knowing who you are and fighting for your life. And my practices work for me, but I also have known people whose practices work for them, such as mindfulness journaling. So I'm advocating for whatever makes you feel good, for whatever, if you write down your thoughts on a piece of paper and that makes you feel good, do that and always do that and keep doing that. If you talk to someone and that makes you feel good, do that. And if it doesn't make you feel good, don't do it. People, I've gotten so much advice over the years and have advocated for myself so strongly and have found what works for me. And, but like I said, that's what works for me. So I honestly can say whatever makes you feel good in a positive way is what people should do.
So can we spend just a couple of minutes talking about the work you're doing now? It's You Impact, right?
Yes. So ironically, with all the DUIs that I had, um, it helped me get this job where I am advocating for a victim impact panel program that was created by a victim who had actually lost a daughter to a second time impaired driver, that's used in the judicial field. And it is such a well designed program that is non judgmental, that helps people. So I advocate and I speak with judges, I speak with probation departments, I speak with prosecutors to share this program that can help people who have gone through or are going through situations that I went through. Being involved in the judicial system and like me having a felony has affected my life. Um, so if I can help people not get to what happened to me, but with what I'm doing, I feel that I am doing my purpose, so to speak. And if I can help any way that I can, if I can give people hope that you can get to a point in your life, despite having a felony, that you're traveling the country, you're living in a warm climate, you're at peace, you're happy, you're healed, you're losing weight, all that stuff is your future. All that stuff is possible. Anyone can achieve that. And I firmly believe people who are incarcerated, people who have been through addiction, have more to offer. they have a wisdom, they have a life experience that not everybody has, and they have different perspectives. And you can get opportunities from your life experience. I'm on a podcast. I've been on the billboard. I've been successful um, because of my healing from what I went through. And I don't think there's a single person who can't do that. I don't care who you are.
I think have a very positive nature. I
Well,
think
I
that's
do, but
terrific.
Augie, and can I say this that there's a group of women where I live who are like, oh, you have everything so together, and I'm like, well, you have no idea. I don't look like what I've been through. I don't speak like what I've been through, but I've been through, and I vaguely touched on my experience with the DUIs. My alcoholism led me to a homeless shelter, and I was in a homeless shelter while I was addicted. I did, while I was addicted to the opioids, after I did things that are so out of my character while I was addicted to the opioids. I am lucky to be alive. Not only did I crash a car off a bridge, but I've hit telephone poles. I have been through all of that. I've been in places that I shouldn't be alive. But I am. And so if I can help people and share my story and show people that you can come from the dark, like I said, the darkest place and not only get to, okay, so I'm doing this now and I'm successful, but you can get to a place where you're like, you know what? I'm proud of myself. I'm happy. Like looking around and feeling happy, money can't buy that.
And that's a great point. And sometimes, you know, on the inside, we can, for me, and I go into jails and prisons all the time, and I kind of lived this when I was away and saw others that I was emulating. But sometimes if I'm not feeling right about myself and things seem bad, one of the easiest things for me to break out of it was to help somebody. Just
Mhm.
do something kind for somebody. And the amazing part about that is, even though I was doing something nice for somebody, they were actually doing something nice for me by letting me do that. I think that that's a way that we can start to feel better about ourselves, and no matter what our circumstance is to just help somebody, especially when they're clearly in some sort of a crisis, or they've got some issues going on that they just maybe need somebody to talk to. So that's
And absolutely, and I think men have and I can't speak, but I think you're better well versed on this. May have a harder time of speaking of emotions and the things that I'm speaking with, but men have that extra layer of having to come out and provide, and maybe some extra challenges. But men have feelings just like women, and there's so many beautiful, kind men who have so much to offer, who can help. I've listened to your podcast of people who I've just been so incredibly inspired by. But I just, I've also heard people are like, well, I can't do that. I've come from this place. I've been traumatized here, and I've been traumatized. Some of it's been self inflicted trauma, and I've had to learn from the trauma and heal from the trauma, which is a daily still struggle to this day. But everyone, who is incarcerated is going to be traumatized at some level. And I want to just say to everyone who's listening, please, 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 your mental health is your physical well-being and your well-being. When you start making good decisions about your life and thinking positively and doing good things, then you just attract more of that. And to keep that, you can heal from this. It's not always pretty, it's not always easy, it can be a up and down type of thing on a
yeah.
daily basis, but anyone can get there, and you can even find peace in a situation of being inside somewhere when you look into your heart and thinking of how what can make you happy that day. What can I do today that may make me a little happier? What can I do today that would make me feel good? you know And maybe just offering your ear to someone sitting next to you listening to help, and maybe you get a good feeling from that. Just little tiny things. And the more you do that, the more you want to do it, and the more that helps all of us.
Well, Trina, I want to thank you for spending time with us. I think that your message is so genuine, your stories are so authentic, and I think that there's a lot of people, and just to be clear, that while our podcast is primarily watched on the inside, we encourage those that watch this to tell their family about it, because we're on all the traditional podcast channels on the outside, so their family can be watching these same type of inspirational stories, that if their loved one is on the inside and has struggled with addiction and had the DUIs and the issues come up, and they think this is never going to change, then they hear somebody tell their story about how things have changed. I think it also encourages the family. So I so much appreciate your time being with us today, and this was a great episode from my perspective. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And I'd like to just take a minute before we close and talk to those that are watching this. So a couple of things. I'm with a company called Second Opportunity. We work in jails and prisons and on the outside helping people with reentry. And we put a reentry program inside as many jails and prisons as we possibly can, so we can help people on the inside to prepare for release. And then on the outside, we'll help them get a job or get into a training program or whatever needs they may have. But as we've watched this podcast, which started in January, as we've watched this grow, because we get numbers from the tablets, it's really amazing. It's now growing. I think they call it the hockey stick, right? It was here, and then all of a sudden it shoots straight up. And I so much appreciate that from the men and women on the inside that are watching this. And I would just ask of you that if there's some new people that come into your housing unit and they've got their tablet and they don't know what to watch for, maybe you can point them to the podcast. Let them see some people that have come through the battles and are now out living a good life and feel better. They'll feel better about seeing the hope and encouragement that our guests bring. I'll tell you, we get a lot of letters, and you are welcome to write to us. So that's at P.O. Box 3411, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. Got 2 letters from a prison in Indiana, almost a couple of days apart, and really powerful letters sharing some of what they're going through, what they've been through. And actually, the spouse of one of the people that wrote to us reached out to have a telephone call with somebody from the Second Opportunity team. She just wanted a little reassurance about some things, and it was great to see our team respond that way. But feel free to write to us if you have somebody that you want to recommend to be a future guest, somebody that was there and now they've gone home and they're living a life that would be a great story. Please let us know that person's name and contact information. We're always looking to find people to put on the podcast. And the other thing is that this happened within the last month or so. So if there's one of our guests or a number of our guests that you are interested in, and as far as you want to communicate with them, ask them a question, follow up something they talked about on the episode, just write to that P.O. Box 3411, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269, and tell us who you want us to forward this to, and we'll make sure it gets in their hands so they have a chance to read it and to respond to you. There are some really powerful stories that we've had, and if one or two of them really resonate with you, that you say, I'd like to follow up, I'd really like to learn more about how that person got through this or is doing that, feel free to write to us. And the people that are on this podcast, as you can see, they're authentic. They are looking to help others. And if they can respond to you in a way that gives you some answers, that makes it easier for you to move ahead in your daily struggles, we want to help facilitate that. So this has been the Path Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Augie Ghilarducci. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to tune in to our next episode.